Hey everyone, welcome to Game of Month 4. I missed the last 2 weeks as I've been busy with moving and settling into my new life and work routines. I had some time today, so I began to create the Game of Month, and I wanted to share the progress that I made today. My main focus today was to try and create a character controller that I could use for the entire game. And when it comes to actually making the character, I have two main approaches in regards to art assets. The first approach is that I work with somebody. In the past, you would have seen that I worked with Raymond Cripps. This was for Blade Construct and Guardian's Call. The alternative, which I use this time, is the Unreal Marketplace. So you may notice this character. The character is FaZe from Paragon. She really suits the main character that I wanted to develop in terms of the personality and also the abilities that I wanted to implement. In terms of abilities, I was inspired by Infamous, specifically Infamous Second Son. I really liked the powers in that game, and I wanted to try and create my own version of a character with unique abilities. The first step was to set up the character, adding in the mesh, creating the animation blueprint, and using blueprints to program the movement. I started with a one-dimensional blend space. This allows you to transition from idle, walk, and run very smoothly. It's a common feature in all modern games, and it makes movement fun to interact with. With the character movement set up, it was time to do the attack. The attack was very simple. It's a montage animation, and it gets called when you left-click. I had both of these systems working together, but I wanted to do something even better. As you notice in the video, when you move around and you left-click, the character is kind of just facing one direction when you left-click. If you've ever played Infamous Second Son or most modern games, the character will actually rotate and face the direction of the camera when they fire a projectile or do their melee attack. So I needed to begin programming a new blend space, and this was one that could work in 2 dimensions. The 2 dimensions would be speed and direction. And once I had this blend space set up, I could now press W, A, S, or D, and the character would move its legs in the correct position, as you can see on the screen. I also created a custom event called Change Camera Rotation, and this is what allowed me to swap between the 2 rotation modes. One where you're orientated towards the direction of movement, and one where you're actually just always orientated towards the camera. So if you have a look here, I can actually move around and face the movement direction, and with one of them, I will only face the camera. And by being able to swap between both of these modes, I can left click and fire a projectile in the direction of the camera, then go back to facing the direction of movement. And this would work with a gamepad or WASD, and yeah, it works really well. So I had the character set up, but there was nothing really to do in the scene. It was time to add some projectiles. I added a notifier to the attack animation, and this allows you to call a specific event during a time within the animation. So within the animation, when the character launches the hand forward, I can call an event such as projectile spawn exactly at the time when the hand goes forward, so it comes out and the player can anticipate it and understand that it will always happen at that time. If I was to spawn the projectile earlier, when you actually left click, the animation would begin to play and you'd instantly already have a projectile out before the animation had progressed. With the projectile added, you could shoot and hit surfaces. I also added in a particle effect on the overlap with a surface to make it more visually interesting. So when the projectile that I created overlaps with a surface, a hit particle effect will come out. I also added in these hand particle effects, and these already came with FaZe's built-in visual effects, so I could just add those to the left and right hand, and when FaZe would use her ability, you would see the particle come up, and it looks quite nice. I also thought it'd be fun to add some physics in, so when you hit a surface, a radial force component uses an impulse. And these are amazing, so you can actually increase the impulse amount, set a radius, and fire an impulse event whenever you want. When the impulse gets fired, it will knock all physics objects within the radius around. There was one last feature I wanted to try implement today, and this was called the hover ability. The idea was that if you held the spacebar down, you could hover. To implement this feature, I added a new input called hover and made the input key spacebar. By having this input axis key, I could actually determine if the player was holding down the key, and this would actually continuously update until you let go, and I set up an if statement to make sure, well, to figure out if you were holding the key down or not. I also added a launch character node, and this changed the gravity as well as launching the character up. So as you hover across, you're launched, and there's a specific amount of force continuously launching you, and gravity is changed to 0.8. So you're hovering and gravity's at 0.8, but because gravity's still on, and because your launch character does not override your Z velocity, you will always start drifting down. And that's how I kind of tackled hovering. When you land, I actually set everything back to default values, so you're no longer getting launched in the air, your gravity is back to 1 instead of 0.8, and all your animations are set back to ground because of the blend space that I created. I also added in 2 extra particles, and these were the same particles for the attack. I put them in the left and right hand sockets of the skeletal mesh, and I activate these when you're hovering and deactivate them when you're on the ground. The result of all of this was a character that could hover around the map. Not only hover, but they could actually shoot, and it felt really great to be able to shoot the boxes and hover around the map. If you're wondering why the hovering and the shooting work together, or the movement and the shooting, I use something called layered per bone, and basically what this node does is it will layer any locomotion animations that I've created with animation montages. And as I mentioned earlier, animation montages are what I use for shooting. So because the hovering animation is from my locomotion, when you're in the air, you're hovering, it will do a blend between both animations, and I specifically said the spine. So anything below the spine will be kept in place, such as the legs, so you can run around and shoot, or you can hover and the legs will be down. But when you left click, the spine, anything above the spine, will actually animate. So that's what forces the projectile to shoot forward, or it forces you in air to shoot forward with the projectile. And that's how I tackled the problem of having the character being able to animate its legs and its body above the spine independently. And that's it. I was really happy with my progress today, especially with the month being so close to the end. I know I always find myself in this situation where it's the end of the month and I have, 6 days or 10 days to make the game, but my goal for this game a month is to just have a fun gameplay section where you fight enemies using the abilities before the end of this month, or end of this week. If you'd like to try out what I created so far, I made an itch.io page. The link is in the description. You can just download it, run the exe, and try out the prototype. As I mentioned at the start of this video, I've been really busy recently, but working on this game a month today made me realize that I probably could have fit in game a month if I didn't overthink everything, and that's one of my core problems in life, overthinking things. So I had so much fun working on this. Rather than figuring out the gameplay, game design, enemy types, and all of that in advance, I just created, and I kept on creating until I had something that I liked. And now that I have something that I like, I can figure out the next step. What enemy would I like to create? See if it's fun, play against it. Rather than overthinking everything and not even starting. I actually wrote up a few game a month design documents over the last 2 months, but I never actually committed to just starting them, so I'm really happy with this month. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I have a few other videos coming out next week, which I hope you'll enjoy. If you have any game development questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. I can do a question and answer segment at the end of my next devlog. Thanks again for watching. I will see you all in the next video.